Well, do you know, when I was young, I wanted a newspaper, and I struggled to read newspapers that were for grown-ups. And I vowed then that I was going to become a journalist and launch my own newspaper for children if one hadn't been invented by then. Well, lots, but there's 24 in the actual First News office who are in here every day, writing the newspaper and designing the pages and taking photographs and things like that. But a lot more, because obviously there's the printers and there's the distributors, the people that get them into the shops and all those sorts of things too. So I don't actually know is the truthful answer to that, but lots. Well, we use the most important stories of the week, the news that's making the headlines on all the TV bulletins, so all the big national and international news. But then we've got more pages to fill, so we look at stories that we think are of particular interest to young people. I think starting from the point of view of understanding that you won't necessarily know the background to stories, so rather than just saying what's happening now, we go backwards and we explain how we got to this point. Gosh, there's all sorts of places. There's news wires, news agencies that send news out to all the newspapers, things that are happening as they're happening. But obviously, like everybody, I mean, there's 24-hour news on Twitter, on Facebook, on internet sites, all sorts of different places. But lots of organisations too, and including the government, they have people called press officers whose job it is to get news stories into the papers, so they're constantly contacting us with stories as well. We make sure it's accurate by checking everything. We would never accept something that we read somewhere else. We would go back to the original person who was supposed to have said it, and just to check that it's accurate and it's true. Do you know, funnily enough, sometimes it takes longer to write the 2 or 3 words that may be a headline than to write the whole story. You write the story first, and then you think, what's going to grab the attention of the reader to make them want to read the story? Let's see if I can see an example. So here's one, look. The story here is about the fact that maggots are better at cleaning up wounds than medicine. So the headline is Maggots 1, Medicine 0. But you know, all sorts of different things really, and we sometimes all sit in the office together and we talk about a story, and we all throw in ideas for headlines, particularly the front page, because that's the one that's really important. That's the one that people are going to see when it's on the shop, on the shelves in the shops, and you really want people to walk past and go, oh gosh, I wonder what that's about. That's the job of the headline. Gosh, that is a really difficult question, because there have been hundreds, but it just so happens that I carry around with me at all times my 2 most favourites, so I can show you them if you'd like, which are, there's one here and it says, just look at it, and it's a picture of a polar bear looking out at the Arctic as the ice is melting before it. Basically, its world is melting. And I just thought it was really eye-catching because it's from the point of view of the polar bear looking out at it. Even though it's a picture of a polar bear's bottom, I think it works. I really like that. And another one that's a bit more recent that we did that I really like is this one. It says, what a difference 10 days make, and then turn to page 2. This is quite a shocking picture. And there we are, look. That's what that baby looked like. In Somalia, starving, but with aid and food and help from charities, 10 days later, it was completely healthy, and I really like that. Gosh, it gets read, I think, 4 or 5 times. The first person who's written it, and then a sub-editor will read it, and then the deputy editor, the proofreader. I always have the final look at it, and then even when we're making the pages, they're called PDFs that we send to the printers, it gets read 1 more time right then. And even then, occasionally, one of the printers has rung us and said, we've seen something wrong. It's amazing that you can read it that many times and still something can slip through, but nearly every time it's perfect. Well, the journalists lay out the pages, we write the headlines and we write the stories and we choose the pictures and then we put them roughly on a page for the designers to design. So their job is to make it look really professional and really nice. And they have got all sorts of tricks that we don't understand, how they can make things look 3D and all sorts of stuff that makes it look a lot more interesting. And then we turn the pages into PDFs, which get sent to the printer. And then that's really cool. You know, we should really get some film of the paper being printed. They have these huge vats of ink, only 4 colours of ink, and they all get mixed together to produce every single colour that's in the paper. So we haven't got all those different colours that are in the paper, just 4 different inks that mix together to produce all the different colours. And what look like massive, great big toilet rolls, which is the paper, and it goes through so speedily and it's all automatic. And what you see at the beginning and then what you see at the end is just amazing, because you see these big toilet rolls and vats of ink, and then at the end all these lovely neat cut folded newspapers, all automatic. It's really clever. Do you know what? I'll let you into a secret about deadlines. You lie to your staff about what the deadline is, because otherwise you would miss it. I mean, I tell them, I hope they're not watching this, I tell them that the deadline is 12 o'clock. But actually, the printers aren't really expecting it till about 4. So that if we're a little bit late, it doesn't matter. But don't tell them I told you that. That's difficult. I always love the animal stories, particularly actually animal pictures. You get unlikely friendships when you get, say, a cheetah that's best friends with a bear or something, and I love all those pictures. But I guess the ones that give us the most fulfillment maybe are ones that when we're running campaigns. We did one about child soldiers in Uganda, and we wrote a feature just about the fact that child soldiers existed, which I think a lot of young people didn't even realise, that kids as young as 10 are given guns and go out to fight in real wars in other countries. And our readers wanted to know what they could do to help, and we ended up having 235,000 First News readers signing a letter to say that they wanted this practice of child soldiers to stop. And the government ended up looking at their policy and pressing for change, and it went to the United Nations. So it really gave the young people of Britain a voice globally, which was fantastic. So that really gave me, you know, made me feel really good. And we run a campaign called My Way, which is about getting people to understand that everybody learns differently at school. I tour schools every year, maybe once or twice a year, with Henry Winkler, who is an author for children, and he writes books about a boy with dyslexia called Hank Zipser. And it became really clear to us that when we were just talking about his books and First News, that so many children, 1 in 5 children, have a learning challenge of some kind. It might not be dyslexia, but all sorts of things. And they were being bullied at school because they were different. So we launched My Way to try and stop that happening, to say to people, look, just because people learn in a different way, it doesn't matter. It doesn't make any difference. It doesn't make any difference to how smart they are. It's just that they learn differently. And we really want to stop this sort of needling and bullying of people that are just different. And I've really enjoyed writing all the different My Way stories and giving kids a chance, in fact, to write stories themselves about them and their learning challenges and how they're really achieving in spite of them. There are lots of shocking stories, sadly. The one that sticks in my mind most at the moment, because the pictures were so incredible, was of the Japanese earthquake and tsunami. I mean, look at this. I mean, this is a picture of it. And there's a boat on top of a house, which is unbelievable. 100,000 children lost their homes, so it was really, really shocking. There are many, many ways for young people to get involved in First News, and it's something we really encourage. We have a page every week called Your News, which is where children can send in reports about anything that interests them. It could be something that happens at school or at a club, or a news story they've just come across, anything that they think is interesting that other people will want to read about. There's also a column in there where they can comment on things that have happened in the news that they have an opinion about, that they want to say. And we send young people out to do reports as well. It may be to a film premiere, it may be to interview a politician or a pop star or somebody like that. It might be reviewing games or computer games. You can also comment on the website. You can go on to firstnews.co.uk where you can comment on things that are happening in the news there. All sorts of different ways. And also, sometimes we've been contacted by young people about a story and they've ended up making the front page news themselves. One that leaps to mind was a girl of 9 who was campaigning to keep her local library open, and it ended up being a front page story and got picked up by some of the adult newspapers as well. I think I pretty much did. I think there was a point when I was thinking I might be a lawyer or I might be a vet, until I realised that sometimes you might have to put animals down, and that completely put me off the idea of being a vet. I only wanted to make them better. But being a journalist, yeah, was something I think from quite young I was really interested in, because I'm basically a nosy person, and the most important thing about being a journalist is that you're nosy and you want to find out things. So yeah, I think so. I was about 15, I think, when I decided I wanted to do journalism. Yes, I was good at English, but you know, these days it's not necessarily essential. It's much more important that you have an inquiring, inquisitive mind, that you want to ask questions, and that you're really good at telling stories, because that's what you're really doing as a journalist. You're telling people a story, and you might not be somebody that can write, but you could be a radio reporter or a TV reporter, and sometimes it might be that you have a specialism or an interest in a particular subject. You might want to be a fashion writer, for example, you know, that sort of a journalist writing about fashion. So it's much more important that you have an interest in fashion than necessarily being good at English. Do you know, unlike some jobs where you have to have certain qualifications, journalism isn't quite like that. It's really good to get as much training as you can, and that might be by doing media or English politics, things like that, and maybe doing a degree in journalism. But the most important thing, because it's a very crowded profession, lots of people want to be journalists, is to get some experience. And that can start right now while you're at school, you know, on your school newspaper. Get involved, get used to doing it. I was 14, 15, and I was doing my school newspaper. I was also doing like a hospital radio news bulletin on at my local hospital. I did free work experience on my local paper. You know, anything you can get that when you apply for a job shows that it's something that you're passionate about is going to give you a head start over other people. I think probably, I don't know, around 12 maybe. Reading just the local newspaper, I think, to begin with, and finding out what was going on in my local area before I probably went on to adult papers. But the reason I wanted to launch First News was because there wasn't really a good national newspaper to read when I was younger, because, you know, there were the tabloid newspapers which maybe ran stories that I wasn't interested in. But the adult news, the sort of the bigger, more serious newspapers were written with vocabulary that I didn't understand, with assuming that I had prior knowledge of things that I didn't. So there wasn't really a newspaper that made sense to me when I was young, which is why I wanted to launch First News. Of course, I love my job. I really do love my job. It's different every day, and the good thing about the news is that you never know what each day is going to bring. You know, and I wake up in the morning, and I am a complete news junkie. You know, I'm straight away, you know, BBC Breakfast is on, and to see what's happened overnight, if I've missed anything, you know, and I'm constantly on the internet, you know, just checking, and I'm on Twitter, you know, constantly wanting to know what's going on in the news, and as soon as something interesting has happened, I'm thinking about how we're going to write that in First News and how we're going to do it, and it's great fun. And I love the fact that we're giving young people the chance to grow up knowing about the world that they're living in, you know, which is something I couldn't do because it didn't exist when I was younger, but also to give kids a voice and to give you a chance to be able to have your say and to get your voices heard in the country.